because I think there's a lot of information. Now, today, the stats we're going to focus on are the luxury market stats, and that market is really in much different condition than the overall when we looked at the overall market a couple of weeks ago. So I'm going to share those stats with you today. And I always like to look at the Market Watch widget. And these are properties over $1 million. And that's how we are actually defining the luxury market for purposes of these stats. Any sale at $1 million or above, or listing at $1 million above, is considered luxury for our discussion today. You can argue whether that's a good cutoff or not, but that's the one we use for the luxury agent status with Keller Williams and for our market. And in order to qualify as a luxury agent, you have to have 2 sales of over $1 million every 2 years. So it's not a high bar, but it's the way we define luxury. So take a look here. You got 110 new listings. You got 139 sold. You got 98 pending and 129 price decreases. So we have, as we do in the overall market, usually more price decreases than we have new listings. But the market, is a little bit balanced here in that we've 110 new listings, 139 sold, 98 pending. We're starting to see a little bit of balance, although every week we seem to be growing in the total amount of inventory that's in the luxury segment here. So, if you can go in and take a look at these things, and you can see that these are not, some of them are minor price, but you can see here 8%, 4%, 4%, 3%. You can see these are significant on over $1 million. You can see that these are significant numbers. So if you're working with a customer that's looking in the luxury segment, great idea to you can sort this obviously by any area you want, and you can add fields in here to narrow this search down. But you see there's 131 price decreases here on this list, and you can kind of go through and take a look at them. And again, some of them, there's one for 17%. So if you're shopping for, in a particular market, obviously it appears that this person that just lowered their price 17% was listed quite a bit higher than the market, and they've been on the market for 45 days, and they've already done a significant price reduction there. So just a way of looking at the market, and just while you're grabbing your morning coffee or whatever, you can jump on here and look at it, and it's very clear in looking at what has happened this year. It's a skill-based market. The more you know, the more you're able to use the tools that we have, and the more you're able to think about what you can do to connect to customers and help them. Still a lot of opportunity out there. Obviously, the total sales projected by NAR have gone from 6.2 million for 2021 down to 4. Seems to keep going down a little bit, but now it's down around 4.2 million. There's a significant drop in the number of units. However, there's still people in your database and people changing situations. There's all kinds of different life experiences that can cause changes, and that's where we can be of service to our customers. So let's move right along and take a look at some of the market stats in the luxury marketplace. So let's go to Collier. And share that. Collier County. There we go. Okay, so again, this is April, the month of April. We'll be getting the month of May stats here in another 4 or 5 days. But this is the month of April, and what we're seeing in the luxury space is quite a bit different than what we saw in the overall market. So we can start by taking a look at days on market, up 154% over a year ago to 61. We're gradually going back to the days of 2017, 18, 19, where we were sitting at 90 days. So houses are staying on the market a little bit longer. Why? Because sales were down 17% overall. Listings were down 14% overall, and pendings were down 19%. So the activity in the market is slowed over what it was a year ago. And as we start to get in through June and start into July, this is when the market in 2022 started to go from peak to down. And the market changes in the last 6 months of 2022 were dramatic. So now we're going to start to look at year over year comparisons that are going to be much closer, because we're not sitting up here 2021, 2022, and all of a sudden 2023. We're going to start to see these numbers stabilize and get closer, so we can measure the progress a little bit easier. So look at the absorption rate. Overall 20%. That's 1 in 5 houses that are expected to sell in the next 30 days. Single family, very low, down to 18%. And look at the the month supply. We're up to close to 8 months supply of single family homes in Collier County, over $1 million. We can see up above that, median prices dropped a little bit, 16%. Overall, 8%. Condos up a little bit. However, look at the number of months supply of condos, quite a bit less than that of single family, and of course our overall. As we go above 6 months inventory, we start to trend toward a buyer's market. And I know that based on broker Jeff's telephone calls, buyers are very aggressive. They're more demanding. They're more, hey, you're lucky to have me. Whereas a year ago, it was like, so what? The next one will be here in 5 minutes. And so the market's changed. The request for repairs, the attitude that buyers have, and is dramatically different. And we'll see on the graphs in here in a couple minutes, we'll see that the market luxury market is especially showing signs of change over the overall market. So these numbers are telling a story. The average list to sell ratio is now down 5%. Last year, that number was over 100. So not only are we seeing less sales, more inventory, we're seeing more flexibility in price negotiations. So overall, the market is headed to favor the buyer. So we'll talk about the CMAs here in a few minutes, but it's really, really, really important to get the pricing right. You see that we have more price reductions than we have new listings. That means that we still have, looks like a tendency for sellers to want to cling on to the days of a year ago when things were multiple offers, prices that were quite a bit higher than maybe their predecessors in a neighborhood. So I think it's important to know what the market's like, to be able to talk honestly with a seller, and to be able to talk optimistically a little more with a buyer. All right, let's take a look now at Lee County. which I think is even more dramatic. So here is Lee County. Take a look at the median prices, stable overall, up a little bit in single family, down a little bit in condos, but overall we're seeing quite a bit more stability in prices, even starting to see a little bit of trending down. Again, look at new listings off a little bit, pendings pretty steady, days on market up to 53. So it's turns are a little faster at Lee than they were in Collier, but still trending upward substantially. But look at sales in Lee County, down 25% overall, down 26% for single family homes, and 24% for condos. And look at the inventory now, close to 8 months across the board, up 125% for overall. And look at condos, up 189% over a year ago. But look at the absorption, down to 16%. That's pretty low. I mean, we haven't seen absorption numbers that low for quite a while. So again, there's a lot of pressure on pricing properties properly. Say that 3 times. Pricing properties properly. Anyhow, there's quite a bit more pressure on pricing the property and keeping up with the market and adjusting to the market rather than chasing the market down. We'll see a slide here in a couple minutes that's what you really would like to make sure that you're on the same page with your seller when you put that listing out there. And if the seller says to you, hey, Brian, I know we're talking 1.5, but my neighbor sold for 1.8. It was just last year at this time. And, let's start at 1.8 and let's work. We'll come down if we have to. And Brian said, well, gee, I'm thinking I got to put about $1,000 in the marketing, the pictures, the drone, everything I got to do here. And I just looking at reality. So now it's a business decision. It's like, okay, what happens? I read an article the other day that properties truly do get stigmatized. So a property that goes out on the market, that's like everybody looks at it and go, what were they thinking? That's no way. Whereas before, a year ago, it'd be like, what were they thinking? Wait a minute, that's the only one around. Look, I like the house, I'll pay it. Now it's what are they thinking? There's 3 others priced way below that, same features and benefits. What are they thinking? And then the consumer will have a tendency to write that property off in their search. They're like, I don't even want to think about that. That's more than I would consider paying. So now as you start down, you start chasing the market down. They're like, well, that didn't work. We didn't have any showings. We didn't have any calls. We didn't have any online showings. We need to reduce, but oftentimes you start chasing the market down. And ultimately what happens, the seller ends up with less in their pocket. That's the bottom line. So we're trying to sell your property at the best possible price for this market in the shortest period of time. That's what we do. And if you give us the opportunity to market a property fairly in comparison to the features and benefits of the other properties in your market, then we can produce results for you. But look at Mr. and Mrs. Seller, sales over last year down 25%. Inventory up. Absorption down. List to sell. So even if we do get a contract, chances are we're going to see a 4 or 5% swing below what we're asking for. Or the buyer's going to say, I'd like a 10 or 15 or 20 or $50,000 credit. So you really have to be careful to bring the reality to your sellers. Okay, let's take a look at some of the graphs from the period there. We'll take a look. Give me a couple seconds to reset here. I'll bring up the Collier, 3 Collier charts here. Oh, it's only open in one now, all right. All right, one more. All right, so let's take a look at the 15-month graphs for Collier. And we'll start with the okay, can everybody see that okay? I might need to come up a little bit on the scale so you can see it. All right, it'll start to
Yeah, that's good. Perfect. Thank you.
anyhow, it's you can only blow it up so much and it'll start to blur, but just so you can see, look at the last, this is February of 22 up to April of 23, 15 months. You can see that beginning in June, July, we started to see the market trend down a little bit. And then we saw a little bit of an uptick in the spring for new listings, pendings, a little bit of an uptick, closed sales up a little bit, the dark green bar. However, what might strike you as the overall number of properties that have come on the market since the middle of last year. So now we have, that's why we see the buildup in inventory. Obviously, listings are dropping off a little bit. Pendings, we're not selling as much. So we're starting to see a lot of inventory. And as a result, the buyers have more leverage. They can have more choices. They can make offers that are probably a little bit less than the listing price, not way less. I think that's, last week we saw some articles that Elon Musk thinks the market's going to crash, and even Barbara Corcoran expressed some questions about New York City area and everything. I don't think that's happening here. What we have in this market is a ton of equity. People have the property values have gone up dramatically since 2018, 2019. So when you're talking with a seller and they're wanting to tell you about the interest rates and how hard it's going to be for them to buy, I think the important thing is, as Brian will tell you every Friday, Denny focuses on motivation. Where are you going? Why do you want to go there? And make sure we have an understanding of what the seller's plans are. And once we have that understanding, now we can start to take a look and say, okay, well, I know that the interest rates are a little higher. There's double what they were last year, I guess. But if you've got a ton of equity that you're going to realize from selling your house, how much do you actually have to put into the new house if you're going to finance part of it? So I think bringing the reality of where the seller's mindset is away from, the local or the national news, away from seeing a number for a mortgage rate, down to what is it actually going to cost you in your circumstances? What can we realistically sell this house for? And what are you realistically going to pay for something that's going to meet your new goals and objectives? So I just think it's pretty dramatic if you're sitting with a seller and you show them this chart and they're thinking that they want to maybe go back to last June or July. The odds are that those higher prices are not going to work very well. They're not going to turn into sales. Let's take a look real quick now at the okay, so this is a chart. Now the month supply here is being calculated based on closed sales. So it's a little more conservative than the month supply calculations that we use for the other stats, which are based on new listings and properties and pending. So it's a combination. But this is showing that, look at the inventory kind of shot up in and it's come back down a little bit based on the number of months of inventory that's out there. It's a slightly more conservative than the other estimates that we had, but look what's happening to median prices. They're trending down a little bit, right? Overall median prices. And so that's what's happening as we increase the number of properties available for sale, decrease the amount of sales. What's happening to median prices? They're tracking flat or a little down. Last one, which is kind of my favorite here, is what I call the absorption rate. We started working on absorption rate, I don't know, a few months ago when there we go. When I was kind of thinking about what's the best way to explain to a seller what's going on in the market. Month supply, kind of an intangible unless you say, well, 6 months is a balanced market. But that doesn't mean that much to a seller. What I think helps a seller understand what's going on in the market is how quickly is the inventory being absorbed. And you can see last year, we were up 55, 56%, 48. And then as we started into the summer months, look at what happened to absorption. So your seller's thinking about what happened last year in May and June, or even last spring. This kind of brings them down to the reality that we're down around 20% absorption rate, meaning that we have less than half of what we had a year ago. So basically, it's April 23, absorption was down 63% over last year, April. So if you're talking to your seller about properly pricing a property, we got to look at the absorption. Now, what is the probability that we're going to sell in the next 30, 60, 90 days? By the way, we'll put these, I'm going to publish these charts in a mass email later on this afternoon. I just got them done, some of them this morning. So let's take a look real quick. Give me a couple seconds. We'll look at Lee, but Lee is even more dramatic than Collier. So we'll do Lee. Now we'll do Lee here. And we'll do Lee sold. Okay. All right, so this is the Lee County picture, which is, I think, quite a bit more significant than even the Collier. Again, these are all properties over $1 million, right? And we're looking at the number of available properties. They're slightly less in the luxury segment in total overall properties in Lee than Collier, but many of the properties in Lee that were 7, 8, 900,000, while Blue, a lot of the newer communities have gone up over $1 million. So the number of properties in Lee that are in the luxury market space has increased a lot because of some of the newer communities up there. But take a look at what's happening. Look at what's happening. We started to see an uptick in January and February in pendings, which is our forward look. We started to see a pretty significant uptick in new listings, which is the blue line, and in sales. Even into March, we were looking pretty good. Now we're starting to flatten out a little bit. And one of the other things you might want to talk to your customers about is for a couple of years during the pandemic, we had little or no seasonality. People couldn't travel, communities were shut down up north. And then last year, everything kind of opened up, and we had even an Uber seasonality because people that hadn't been able to travel for a couple of years wanted to go back home, see family, and a lot of people, wanted to go back over to Europe. So this summer, I think we'll still see some seasonality, maybe not to the extent that we saw it in last year, but we'll still see some seasonality, and we'll still see these numbers probably drop off a little bit. Although typically we do write a number of contracts in May, June, and July because people come back down after things have quieted down, and it's a lot easier to see property there. So again, the market is dramatically affected by the amount of inventory that's out there, by the new listings that are coming in the market, and by your sales. Any questions? Comments? I mean, this is information I suggest you share as much as you can with your sellers, A, because you want to be considered the local expert on the market, and B, because it helps to set the expectations of both buyers and sellers when you're working with them. This is again a chart that shows a little bit less inventory when we consider the number of closed sales into the number of total properties out there. But look at the median pricing. Starting to flatten, trend down a little bit, and supply is bouncing around a little bit, but still supply is driving the fact that the prices are starting to flatten, and I don't think we see a big downturn. I guess that was my comment earlier, was that while there are experts around the country and some that profess to be experts, predicting doom and gloom, it's just there's nobody in our market. There's a lot of people far smarter than me in our market that are commenting that even though we see a drop of 4 or 5% in list to sell, we see pressure on prices. We're still not seeing anything that would indicate a bubble or in some kind of crescendo of downward trend in pricing. So your buyer that's sitting on the fence telling you that, gee, Brian, I think the market's going to crash, I'm just going to hang out. Well, let's look at the last 15 months. See any crashes there? Let's look at the last 3 or 4 months. See any signs it's going to crash? Yes, you can get a better value, I think, now than you could have a year ago. Yes, there's more choices, but I don't see, at a certain point, a seller with a significant amount of equity is going to say, that's it. I'm not going to deplete my equity by dropping my price way down. Last one would be the absorption in Lee County, which is, I think, even more. Whoops, I gotta stop that one, Jeff, before you start another one. There we go. But look at the absorption in Lee County. Down 66% over last year. It's 17%, 16-17%, which is very low. So again, you got to share this information with your sellers. You can see that it's better than it was. We got a little uptick, but still we're still sitting at 60% less than a year ago. So when you're talking about pricing and you're talking about motivation, you got to understand that and we'll see it here in the next discussion. You got to understand that pricing is a lot to do with how quickly someone can sell and realize their goal, which is where we started with in the first place. What's your motivation? When do you want to be there? What are your expectations? And how can we put a price on this particular residence that's going to help you to meet your objectives. So again, we'll publish these charts. I encourage you to share them. If you've got a listing presentation coming along, in the luxury space, I encourage you to share these numbers because they are important to have the buyer understand and the seller understand exactly where we are in the market. All right. So today's topic is CMAs. I think the CMA is become even more important because of the pressure on pricing properties accurately. So what I'd like to do is share with you a little bit of a PowerPoint here that I put together. And let's see how I can do this. I gotta go. Share screen. PowerPoint. Share that. Let's see if I can run it. Hey, you see that okay? So this is a workshop that I did a couple of years ago, and a lot of it is nothing's changed too much. CMA is a CMA, is a CMA, is a CMA. What's changed is the importance of it and the fact that we have quite a bit of good data on sales. And just responding to until 3:30. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about CMAs. What's a CMA? Comparative Market Analysis is the acronym. But a good CMA is an art. It's allowing you to take your view of the market, take the market data, and evaluate it to get your customer the right amount of information. Now, we're transaction brokers, so what we're wanting to do is recommend to our sellers what the range of prices that they can consider that could give them the best chance of selling quickly. So we need to be supplying our sellers with this market data that we've given you here, and we need them to understand what's going on in the market and what's going on in their neighborhood. So what we're trying to provide as transaction brokers is a guide for your customer, and you want really your goal, I believe, is still to have your sellers decide what they ultimately want to try to start marketing. What's the starting price? I believe that you really don't want to have ownership in that number, or not too much ownership, because you want you want to be on the same page and same wavelength. And if you decide that you're going to start out a little higher than what you would recommend, then I think you have to have an agreed upon strategy to start with, to say, okay, if we start there and we don't get any activity or showings or offers, within a certain week to 10-day period, we would really have to we would really have to start facing the reality of the market. And one of Dennis Grimes' favorite expressions is, the market will only tell you one thing. What's that, Brian?
You're pushing me on that one, Jeff, because he's got so daggone many phrases, I can't remember them all.
One says the market will only say no. Right?
Okay.
That's the only thing the market will tell you. No offers, no showings, no contracts coming your way. The market's telling you no. Whatever your combination of features and benefits are relative to the price you have it out there, if you're not getting any activity, the market is telling you no. There you go. And when the market's telling you no, what do you got to do? You got to change your strategy, your pricing. You got to change your outlook a little bit because we'll see a really good chart here in a little bit that, you know, what you may be doing is helping your neighbor sell. Right? Because you're out there and you're a little overpriced and maybe you're not quite as nice as your neighbor. Your neighbor's down there, you know, at a price that you maybe as a realtor feel is where your customer should be. They're insistent on trying to squeeze a little extra out. The other thing that I would strongly suggest you do, in addition to working on the market analysis, is to prepare a net sheet for your seller at these various scenarios. So there's a couple of good utilities in there, and even if your property, you know, even if your property's new to the market, you can still start to take a look at what the features and benefits are relative to the other things that are on the market. And again, we're very neighborhood specific in Naples. There's 300 or 400 neighborhoods. So you want to make sure that you're focused on a target area that makes sense. All right. So we're going to try to guide our customer into the right area of pricing and to work with them so they feel comfortable, and that if they're going to make a decision to go a little bit higher, then you have to say, okay, when the market says no, are we all on the same page that here's what we need to do? Obviously you want to be the market expert in your neighborhood. The first thing I think you need to do is to set up a search in MLS for that particular neighborhood or subdivision or whatever. And you want to set it up so that every time something changes in that sphere, could be a 3-mile radius in the estates, could be a 5-mile radius, could be within a particular subdivision, you know, in Mill Run or Monterey. It could be a condominium complex inside of a planned community. It could be a lot of different things, but you have to be able to first define the neighborhood and what that is, and where you can see some comparison that you can draw to help with your pricing, to help your customer understand, you know, where they're at relative to where they want to price it. And I know back when I was an agent, I used to put them in the car, but let's set up a showing at several of these these homes in the neighborhood, and you go look at them, give me your impression. I mean, I want you to understand that you're going to be compared constantly against what's in your region or your neighborhood or your area. So then we started talking about absorption rates, and we started publishing the absorption data. I think it was 5 or 6 months ago, but the whole idea is for people to know what's going on. Yeah, in the overall market, here's what's happening in Collier County, but here's more likely what's happening in your particular neck of the woods. So, and you want to know what the position of your customer's home is in the neighborhood, and we're going to try to work toward a scenario where you can say, here's the likelihood that your home is going to sell in the next 30 days. All right. So how do we produce a CMA? Well, the first thing we're going to talk about today is let's calculate the market absorption. And market absorption is not a difficult concept. It says if there's this many that's sold in the last 30 days, and there's this many that's on the market, what percentage of those sold in the last 30, 60, 90 days is divided into the total number of available homes. So it's not a difficult calculation, but it's the concept to your customer saying, how quickly is this home going to sell relative to what's in the market now, and understanding that new homes may come into the market that may change our picture. Okay. So, you know, establish the details of the customer's home. We're going to do a nice printout for them. We'd like to have a picture of the front of the home. Maybe if you have a few minutes before you take the listing or before your listing presentation, you can drive the neighborhood, see what else is going on in the neighborhood, see what the condition of the neighborhood is, take a look at the amenities, do a little bit of homework so that when you, the NAR stat is many sellers only meet with one realtor. So if you go in and you make a good presentation, you may get the listing without a lot of competition, but what we're trying to do here is to give you a list of tools and techniques that'll give you the best chance of getting a listing. So finding the comparables in the neighborhood or market area is what you really want to do. You want to find the most comparable. What we're talking about is the size of let's take it's a single family home, and your market is your home is 2,000 square feet. Okay, so obviously we want to look at homes in that size footprint, maybe go down to 16 or 1,700 and as high as 23 or 2,400, but not 3,500 versus 1,200. The minute you start getting footprint sizes that are dramatically different, you run into difficulty adjusting to the comparable, to the subject property from the comparable. So then we want to make sure that we look at comparables in basic blocks. Square footage is one, features, pools, any other amenities that are, a separate garage or if it's a condo, is there a cabana, is there a storage area, is there extra parking places, whatever you can do to try to isolate how to set up a level playing field to make your comparisons with. Then you're going to make adjustments to the comparables, right? And the two acronyms, SBA and CBS, two different ways of getting to the same thing. If the subject is better than the comparable, you're going to add value to the comparable to bring it up to the subject. Conversely, if the comparable's better, that should say subtract. Comparable better, subtract. Anyhow, what you're doing there is if the comparable's better, it has more square footage, it has a larger lanai, it has an extra parking space. That's why we're going to subtract from the comparable to bring it down to our subject. Okay. So then we're going to make these adjustments, and we're going to have hopefully a handful of comparables that are now adjusted for the various variables. Maybe it's upgrading. Maybe your customer's place is still pretty bare bones and hasn't been upgraded with new flooring or new appliances or new surfaces. So now we have to get a little bit subjective and say, okay, this house that we're comparing to, similar in size, completely updated, new appliances, new bathrooms, new flooring. Now we have to start to say, okay, we're going to have to subtract from that sale to adjust for the condition of our home. All right. And then we're going to try to establish a price range around those comparables. And we can talk about preparing the report. All right. So let's first talk about market absorption. And this is a guy by the name of Zan Monroe, whose goal was to educate 1 million realtors. Did a lot of this stuff and has a lot of good data out there. And one of the things that he was really big on is absorption. So his factors for looking at absorption are, he's talking about looking at how many transactions have occurred in the last 12 months, 9 months, 6 months, and 3 months. So it's relatively easy to go into your MLS and say, okay, how many homes in this market? Remember, we've isolated a market as being a subdivision, a radius, a community, and we want to go to the MLS and say, how many homes have sold in the last 12 months, 9 months, 6 months, and 3 months? Now, there's something that we added to MLS a couple of years ago, called a comp sold. And the reason that we put those in other words, maybe you sell a home that was for sale by owner, or it was new construction, or it was sold before it ever went on the MLS. You can now put in a abbreviated version of the listing showing the sale and all that. And the purpose of that is to put a comparable, obviously give you credit for the sale, but the main purpose is to create more comparable sales so that you can get a better, more accurate view of what's going on in the market in the last 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 12 months. So that's an important thing for you to look at. And when you have a chance in your when you're looking at your comparables, and you're doing your search, you can include, I think they call them SDO, sold data, and you can include those when you're doing your search for your comparables, because it's going to put in the prior comp sold or sold data information, and you can get the best of all those. So we're going to create, obviously, 26 divided by 12, 2.2. We're going to look at the average number of homes sold per month. And now we've got a trend, okay, over time. In this particular case, it's trending flat, and then maybe in the last 3 months, we've seen a little bit of an uptick. Then you're going to divide that into the current listings in MLS. And you're going to come up with a month's supply, and we're going to turn that into an absorption, okay? So now we're looking at the number of months supply, and then we're going to take a look and show the customer what the absorption is. And here's the average list price, average sale price, and average days on market, all right? And again, they're saying 6 months supply is a balanced inventory. Less than 6 months would be sellers, and we've been in a seller's market really since 2019. All right, I mean, that's the concept here. And I obviously I can send you all of this, but basically this is what we just talked about in terms of the steps that you need to calculate the absorption. And at the end of it is divide the number of houses for sale by the average close per month equals the number of months supply. Okay, so here's a little example worksheet that you can play around with. And it's not a bad idea to look at this in terms of the maybe you want to look at it North Naples and then dive into Mill Run or Monterey or Autumn Woods, so you can give the customer an idea what's happening in maybe in a little wider part of the market. And you can use this little exercise to go into the MLS and put this information down, and boom, you'll have a month's supply. All right, so let's talk a little bit about, once we've calculated this, let's talk a little bit about what it means. All right, so this is a famous Zan Monroe concept called the stagnant mass, also known as the market says no, right? So you can go into a market, you can take the data that we just found, and you can do these calculations. You can put the market, the date, okay? And what we're looking over in the left side is the number of available listings, number of active listings, and then what's been sold in the last 30, 60 days. What we did, really, we did, I think in our previous chart here, we broke it into I think we did 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. So we broke it into 3 segments. So this is 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. And you can start to see the fact that those that are not getting any activity are a certain percentage of the market. And it's important to show your seller to make sure that the seller understands that, hey, either we're gonna be priced right, we're gonna start to see showings. We're gonna start to see online showings, then requests for showing, then offers. Then sales. Now, what happens if we start to get a lot of showing requests, but no offers? And what happens if we get none of the above? Those are all things that you can monitor your listing and the rest of the market and may keep your seller informed regularly on. What's happening here? Am I stuck? All right. I don't know what happened there. There we go. We're back. So this is a chart that I would watched a webinar from a top producer over on the other coast, Terry Martin Story. And this is what we talk about in terms of the dangers of following the market down. Okay, so if you pricing in the direction of the market, you can see where over on the right there's effective pricing, right? And then there's trying to chase the market down when you started too high in the first place. So when you chase the market down, that means you're regularly reducing until you hit a point where you're starting to get some offers, or excuse me, starting to get some showings, starting to get some interest. Now you know you've got into a range in the market where your property is going to get some attention and possibly an offer and a contract and a sale. So what you have to do is you have to explain to the seller that if we start too high, then we got to go down and down and down until we start to see activity. And that's probably going to yield you less in your pocket if we have to make a number of price changes in order to stimulate activity. Okay, so that initial list price is really important to make sure we're not starting too high and chasing the market down in order to try to get some activity. And once you start doing that chasing, and people are looking in the MLS and going, wow, this price has been reduced 3 times. What's the problem? You know, maybe they started too high, maybe now they're more motivated to sell. When you start to see that kind of pattern, what kind of an offer would you expect? Probably a little lower than you were hoping for. So that's an important thought there when you're talking to your seller about pricing. So this is a great chart. This is similar to a chart that Denny has, but I think it's kind of a little bit got a little bit more information in it, that's all. We think the more you ask, the more you get. Reality, the lower you ask, the more you get. So when the seller is talking to you, when you're trying to help them make their decision about where to start out in the market, you can see that fisherman number 1 goes 14 days, no activity. Now you can go online and look at your, online showings on the portal. You can look at the reverse prospecting and in your MLS. You can turn reverse prospecting on. You can go and look and see the number of times your listing was sent out by another realtor to a customer. And if that list is sparse, that's the market talking to you. The realtor going, man, I don't think this home makes sense. So look at what was the second layer in our stagnant mass is here 14 days, no offers with lots of activity. No man's land is the most dangerous. It feels like you're doing well, but you're actually helping number 3 over here sell their house, right? So it's kind of interesting that I think that the chart is kind of interesting, and maybe you want to have this chart with you on your listing presentation, because this is kind of a neat chart to share with a seller, because basically you're giving them their options, and when you're looking at the range that you want to recommend to list at, and when the seller says, well, what do we have to do to be number 3? And now you've got some information for them that compares what's going on in the neighborhood, what's listed already, the days on market of some of these other listings, to see what's happening, so that you try to become fisherman number 3 and not number 1 or 2. There's also a term that we haven't heard for a little while called frozen assets. And the reason we haven't heard about frozen assets recently is because there haven't been very many of them. Houses were turning over quickly, selling in, very, very short periods of time. But if you have a listing and you're going to put in the investment to do your quality pictures, your drone shots, your floor plans, and all of the various virtual tours, video, all of the things that you need to really put your property out there and give it a good look, you're going to do all that and then find out that there's no activity whatsoever. That's not going to get you to the closing table. So it becomes what we call a frozen asset, and you don't want too many of those laying around. And if you have to set up your communication with your seller from the get-go. How often are we going to communicate? Here's the information I'm going to provide you, and here's the decisions we need to make based on what's going on in the market. Because when the market says no to number one needs to say, okay, what do we need to do to get, we don't want to be number 2. What do we need to do to get to number 3? Kind of a cool chart, huh? All right. Let's see. What else I have? Okay, so this is another chart. It's kind of fuzzy, but it illustrates a point that you can talk to your seller about. Okay, what in our neighborhood can we control? Right. Well, can we control the location? Can we control the size of the home? Can we control the features of the home unless we are planning on doing some things in advance of going on the market, maybe offering a credit to something, that we don't have. But in general, the location, size, and features of the house are what we got. So what we have to sell. The condition and the price are the 2 things that a seller can control. Obviously, the seller can do some things in the way of sprucing up, maybe some landscaping, maybe some paint inside, some decluttering. Those are all things that the seller can do to make their property stand out more than the competition. So when you're having these discussions, you gotta pretty much emphasize to the seller there's a lot of things we can't do anything about. We just have to go out on the market in comparison to the other properties and try to compete and get offers. All right. So one of the things we can do is, let's take a look. How many of you are familiar with RPR? Have you ever used it?
I've heard of it. I haven't used it, Jeff.
Okay. So RPR is let's see what we got here. RPR is an online tool that's available to members of NAR. So if you're a realtor member, which you are, you have the ability to use RPR. And I'm going to log in here real quick so you can. There we go. I'm gonna show you a CMA tool that I think is pretty good. It's NARRPR.com. All right, so let me get back to. I need a. See if I can look here. No, that's a piece of land. Just trying to get a couple of examples here for you. Okay. All right, here we go. So you can log in to your, you can log in any, if you haven't set up a login, I urge you to go ahead into NARRPR and set a login up, and we'll show you how we can use this tool to help you with your CMAs. All right. So we'll go back to the home screen here. And so this is what you have when you first log into RPR. It basically has a search engine. You can put in a property address. You can look at a market. You can search just like you can in any MLS search. And you might have an address that you want to look up for prospecting purposes or for so I'm just going to pick one here. Maybe this one here. Okay. So this is a property that you can go all over the United States, as there's no limit to what to where you can put an address in. So this happened to be a property that one of our agents was looking to list up in Sarasota. So we did a little bit of, or in Venice, excuse me, we did a little bit of advanced analysis here. So once you put that property address in, RPR will come back with information from the MLS, so it's actively listed. It will tell you the information about the home. It will tell you the RVM. Okay, so we're all familiar with the Zestimate, right? So this is a value generated by the software for the RPR software. This is paid for and maintained by your NAR dues. So you're getting immediate value back for that check you write every year. But it's kind of a cool thing. It's basically, I think, one of the best places to start when you're doing a CMA. Okay. You want to put the property address that you're looking at in there, okay, and have it talked a little bit about what do we know about this property, okay? So the realtor valuation method, which is gonna be different than the Zestimate, or maybe the CoreLogic estimate that we get in our MLS, it's gonna give you a lot of information, and to me, it's a great place to start when I'm trying to figure out, you know, how to value a property, all right? In this area, it's gonna tell you single family home when it was last sold. Price to estimated value when it was sold was 101. Those were back in the days of October 2021 when things were going crazy, right? So it's going to tell you a little bit about the home, right? And these are all details that you can get by just putting a property address in. We can look at the details of the realtor valuation method. And lo and behold, what we'll tell you is that, you know, here's how we got to this method. Here's the comparables that we established, we being the realtor software established, right? And where the comparables are and what they are. Here's your subject property. These are going to be comparables. And this is a start on creating your comparable list. Now remember, they're using proximity, they're using zip code, they're using geo techniques that may not work for you if you're looking in Gray Oaks and right across the street is Point Siena, where you have $4 million house on one side and a $280,000 house on the other. So depending upon what geographic area you're in, some of these properties that they're picking out may or may not make sense. But if you look at what they did was, look at the square footage similarities between these three that they picked as the comps, right? Look at the square footage similarities from 2087 to the comps that they picked. And then they took a look at some off-market properties, again, that were, they looked at it, but apparently they were not going to include this because of that. It's way outside the range. So that's how the realtor valuation method was arrived at. And now you can go in there and you can start taking a look at what else is going on. And you can take a look and create your own CMA. You can also do what's called a refined value search, right? You can say, what happens if I do a major kitchen remodel, all right? And then that would add an improvement value. What happens if, in other words, they're going on the basis of the property, but if that customer has done a major remodel and spent $8,000, and that's where you would put that in. If it's some type of an outdoor improvement, that's where you would add that in. And here's what I like about this program. You can see these little sliders, right? So now you can go in and start making adjustments to the property based on conditions are maybe a little slower now, right? Exterior condition is better. Interior condition much better. Lot size the same. View not so good. Privacy good. So now what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've adjusted based on what, let's see what I know about this property. And maybe there's a little bit more privacy. So, you know, you can see how it's adjusting the property, right? So now we've got a way of taking a look at what happens because of what we know locally about the property. And here's your seller's net sheet, which is one that they've added. It allows you to go through and do a net sheet calculation for your seller. which is built right into RPR, okay? And again, I think when you're going on your listing presentation, you want to have your range, or maybe you have a range of 2 or 3 prices, a low, middle, and a high. But you want to be able to maybe take that middle range, right, and put in the information. Now, there's another program on the front page of your agent dashboard called Remind. And Remind will allow you to get a hold of all this information, and also is another source of good CMA information. So I recommend that you try logging into this program. You can create some very nice reports from it. They're a little bit too voluminous in my opinion, but you can certainly, when you go to create the report, you can go ahead and tailor the report a little bit to your needs there, okay? So I'm going to show you 1 or 2 other things, but is everybody kind of have an idea that maybe this might be something worth checking out?
Yes, I
Remember,
like it.
CMAs are not, there's no way to call it a scientific analysis. You're taking your knowledge as a realtor, you're looking and creating a neighborhood that you feel is as homogeneous as possible. You're gathering the data, what's going on in that neighborhood, what are the most recent sales, what are the comparable sales, and then you're trying to come up with an idea of what you think the range of starting prices are. So again, there's a lot of things you can do in this. You can go in here and take a look. There's a number of reports that can be created. And, you know, you can decide if you wanted to do a seller's report. You know, you got all these pages here that you can include or exclude, right? And this will brand your report. If you just want a simple property flyer, you know, it will create a property flyer for you.
No.
And there's also, obviously, remember, in command, you put your listing in command, you have a lot of this also. But again, this is your tool. It's available only to realtors. And, you know, it's pulling the information in from the MLS, and it's going to help you create a report for your seller that you can use on your listing presentation. So I'm going to show you one other thing before we sign off. Stop the share here and go back to okay. Let me get out of here. Let's sign out. I'm going to go back into MLS. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the MLS dashboard. Okay. Now, if you scroll down here, you can see that there's a product called Remind Pro. You can click on that. And this is, again, this is a freebie that's attached to your MLS, part of what you're paying for. And this is again, it's attached locally to our MLS, but it has a tremendous amount of See if I've got any saved searches or any searches, recent properties. Okay, I've just pulled up can you see this okay? Is it tracking?
Yes, you
Okay.
can see it.
Well, this is basically a listing. But what I can do with any property is I can pull it up. This happens to be a lease, but doesn't matter. What we're trying to find out is here's the key stats on that property, right? And then the other thing is it's going to show you, based on the information that they have, here's the owner for 9 years, taxes are, and look at the equity it's available in this property. So you can look up the seller's equity in the property, right? And you can look it up and you can now start to take a look at, this is the taxes, assessed values, market values, history of the property, and then down into the automated valuation methods, which now say that on average, this property's, valued at $1,937,000. If there's a mortgage on the property, it will tell you that there's a mortgage on the property, and it will tell you what the balance is, or when it was taken out and how much was financed. So now I can go and do a pretty accurate seller net sheet because I know what that equity looks like and I know what I can talk to my seller about. Let me see if I can get a different maybe get a resale property here. I'm teaching a class, so I'll be done in about 10 minutes, okay? So again, this is a listed property, but you can now go ahead and look at the information, who's the listing agent. But if you're looking up a property that's not currently on the market, this is what this will be glad to tell you. It'll tell you the loan balance, it'll tell you the net equity, tell you what the value of the property is, and you can get a lot of information here when you're getting ready to do your CMA, right? And it will tell you the mortgage history, right? It will tell you the valuation of the property based on these particular sources. There's your estimate, right? And your remine estimate and your First American title estimate. Again, these aren't the end-to-end all, but it's information that's available to you about a property before you start to figure out what it's worth. And it can give you information about the owners if they're available, and demographics for the area. So there's a lot of information here that can help you prepare to do a CMA and to have information about your subject property, okay? And that's, again, available to you by just going to Remine off of your matrix right here. And Remine is, again, you can do searches. And Remine also has a built-in CMA tool, which again is based on valuations of properties in the nearby area. These are just properties that I've looked up in the past. And now you can start to look at, oh, I was looking that one up. That was an interesting one. But you can look up any property and get quite a bit of information about it. What the property history is, valuation. So I would start here, and I would start in RPR, and I would get a gauge for what's going on with the property. Then I can go into the MLS and I can create a CMA here. Right. Or I can create a CMA in RPR, or I can create a CMA in Matrix. And, if you'd like, we could probably do a workshop to actually create a CMA, but, it takes quite a while to build it up and do it, which I'd be glad to. Maybe I should, if you're interested, I'll do that. I can do that for another class, but I think the important thing is to understand that a CMA is not scientific. It's taking data based on your knowledge of the market, assembling it and presenting it to a seller in terms of a range of what you believe that property would do best to be marketed at, and then partnering with your seller to decide where you want to start out and how you want to proceed once that listing hits the market. So a good idea to have in place an agreement for how often you're going to communicate, how often you're going to look at the results, and how often you're going to try to react to the market and what the market's telling you. And that should be no more than, I think, a week to 10 days, because you don't want to sit stale on the market. You want to be able to react as things are going along. So use these tools to investigate the value of the property. Use the absorption calculations to see how quickly things are selling in that neighborhood, right? Use the features and benefits analysis to narrow your comparables down to, you can get half a dozen, that's great. You can get 3 or 4 really good ones rather than 12 that aren't so good and you got to make a bunch of adjustments. Try to get it down to half a dozen comparables that are very similar or can be adjusted. So if you're looking at pool homes and you use homes without a pool, you realize you have to start making adjustments. So try to make as few adjustments as you can. And, some of them are going to be subjective. Updated kitchen, updated bathrooms, updated flooring. Those are going to be subjective, but as long as you use the same value to adjust, you're going to end up with the same series of conclusions. So we can actually do a whole exercise on just preparing the actual CMA, but I think the majority of the work you're going to do to make it easier is to gather the right amount of data and have it available. And once you have it available and you got your comparables, then it's a matter of putting that into a report, making the adjustments, and recommending the end result to the seller. So it's 3:28. Do you have any questions or comments or things you'd like to discuss? Or would you like to get 2 minutes of your life back?
Jeff, that was excellent. And just when you're doing those, if you have to make adjustments, say you're doing your CMA right off of Matrix, have you ever found some source, like a local source, that tells you, okay, I need to factor in how much I got a 3.2 versus a 3.2 plus a den?
Right.
Have you found a source that goes, for your local market, here's a pretty good idea of what that den would be worth, or something like that?
There's appraisers' guides that you can Google. Appraisers don't give, like I've seen people make square footage adjustments based on the selling price, and that can be misleading. An appraiser might do $100 a square foot, but whatever you pick within reason, like a pool, you can spend $50,000 on a pool, but an appraiser will give it $15,000 or $20,000. But if every pool you adjust in and out is $15,000, the end result is it's all going to be relative. As long as you make the same adjustment up or down for each feature. And I always say, if it's a square footage difference, I like to use $100. You could use $500 or $1,000, but if you use $100, then for example, let's say you're adding a bedroom. Okay, we'll start to think about what that bedroom is, maybe it's $500. I used to have an appraiser's guide, and they're very conservative in terms of when they make their adjustments. If you look at an appraisal report, their adjustments aren't major. They're using, modest increments to make sure that they don't emphasize one part of the home or another. But
Okay,
that's where the science is. There's adjustment for, here's what appraisers will adjust basically for rooms. They'll adjust for square footage. They'll adjust for major features like pool, garage. And lanai, maybe an area, lanai area. They'll adjust sometimes if there's a big difference in the lot size, right? They'll adjust for what's called effective age. And I've seen them, you have homes that are 10, there's one built in 1990, the other 1995. They'll use $2,000 a year for effective age. So the home that's 10 years newer gets a $20,000 benefit over the home that's 10 years older. Why do they use 2,000? I don't know. It's just a way of establishing some value for the difference in the age of the home.
okay.
I
That's
don't
great.
have a magic wand for that, but I can tell you that if you're comparing 5 or 6 homes and you're adjusting using the same factor for each one, you're going to come out with a relative range of pluses and minuses.
Okay.
That's where now, once you get all done with that, you'll be surprised at the fact that you can get a very good comparison of your subject home to the comparables. You'll start to see those adjusted prices be pretty consistent within a few $1,000s of each other. And then you're going to say, boy, Brian, you did a nice job on that. That's really first class work. Really, seriously, when I get done with this, if I see a big one home sticks out like this, I go back and I go, Broker Jeff, what were you thinking? There shouldn't be that much. They should be, when they're adjusted, within a reasonable range of each other, unless you picked a comparable that's 1,000 square foot bigger, or 5 bedrooms versus 2 bedrooms. Unless you picked a comparable that's way out of whack and you adjust it anyhow, and it doesn't come down to a reasonably level range, then you don't have a good comp. That's always when I've finished a good CMA with 5 or 6 comps, and there's $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 difference between the high and the low, then I feel like, hey, I've done a reasonably good job of presenting to my seller a good CMA with a good range of where this house should start out at, or where this condo should start out at. And that was my measure of effectiveness. If I did a good job adjusting and I used the same adjustments for every adjustment, then I could feel comfortable that I had something going. And if you get a seller that basically says, I have green granite, and therefore my house should be worth a lot more. Then say, okay, let's do this. There's 3 others listed for sale in the neighborhood. Jump in my car and let's go see them. And when they get all done, they go, well, this place is nicer than mine. Well, this place is nicer than that. And they'll get a feeling for what you're trying to do for them, which is a buyer standing out in front of this house and this house and this house. Hopefully they reach similar conclusions. But again, there's a lot of, I won't say skill, there's a lot of feel for a CMA. And if you pick the right neighborhood and pick the right comparable area, like the estates is one that's more difficult because, so what I always tried to do in the estates was pick a 3, maximum 5 mile radius and take a look at what's going on. I had one that was in the estates, but it was a mile from a Publix. Now, if I pick one 4 or 5 miles away, is that as good a location? Basically, where is it to the amenities and the schools? So I try to use a radius that makes sense. And when you get that radius down to 3 or 4 or 5 miles, then you can start to see the pricing will start to get a little bit closer together. So, and the other thing that I guess is if you're out in the estates and you're doing a CMA, outbuildings, exotic RV garages and things like that, the appraiser gives very minimal value to guest houses, fancy RV garages, storage buildings, outbuildings, because they're trying to compare a home to a home. So I actually had a listing one time where the guest house was nicer than the house. And we could never get an offer because, you know, the mortgage and the appraiser would never give it any value. You know, they'd go in for financing and the appraiser would give, you know, $10,000 to the guest house. The guest house was the nicest part of the property. So, you know, it's an art, not a science. We're not appraisers, but we are knowledgeable, skill-based professionals that can use the data we have and come up with a good range of where the seller should be.
All right, and thank you again, Jeff.
Thank
Excellent.
you. Thank
Hopefully
you so much.
And made your day go a little better, and enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks, Jeff.